Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Okay, good afternoon. This is the first in a series of sponsor presentations. The first presentation is one that will be given by Vineet Thuvara, who's a group program manager of the Surface team, and Daryl Wilson, who's a program manager on the Surface team. They were very interested in giving this presentation. They're very excited about doing this. They've been planning it for some time. They're going to be talking about the Surface Pro digital pen design. Thank you.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for making this session possible. When we say sponsored presentation, it is not a marketing spiel. I'm not going to sell any product here. We're just going to tell you some stories. First of all, I get this opportunity, along with Daryl on our team, to talk about our products, to represent a group of really smart people at Microsoft who work on technology and take the technology to the next level every day. But for me, what's most exciting is to come here and see a group of people who are taking that technology beyond what we can imagine. People who are creating leadership positions in the grassroots, thinking about real users and making a difference in the lives of people. So to the 400-odd people who are here, who are taking a leadership position in technology, in the education space, and creating readying our youth for the future, thank you for doing that. And so it's a big round of applause from Microsoft and my colleagues for all of you. Please join me. Today, Daryl and I are going to talk about the story of the development of the Surface Pen. No big demos or any presentations, but generally talking about what do we as a team think about when we try to solve these problems. What are the key things that we care about? And there are three parts to the story. One, what's the vision for Microsoft? How does the pen fit in? The second one is, who are our customers? What are the scenarios in which they are using the pen? How does it fit into our overall framework of Microsoft technologies around the broad spectrum of hardware and software? And finally, we'll talk about some of the technical challenges that the team faces and how do we solve them on a day-to-day basis. So that's the quick story. But what you guys are doing here is the most difficult thing to do on a sunny day sitting inside in Seattle. It rarely happens. So thank you. So if you look at the history of productivity, in olden times, thousands of years back, people had to walk thousands of miles to deliver a message. Then advent of writing comes in. We write, hang letters to pigeons and send them and deliver the message. And that leaves behind people time to do other stuff. That makes people's lives productive. And then Henry Gutenberg invents the printing press. It's easy to communicate farther around the world. And then finally, with the advent of internet and the digital revolution, we are able to send messages at an instant around the world. But one thing that remained constant is the power of writing. Writing is something so powerful, so personal. It is an embodiment of your personality. You want to write when you sign your page. We still sign our pages. We still sign when we make payments on a credit card because it's something so fundamentally close to defining our identity. So we think writing is not going to go away anywhere. The forms of writing will change. How we capture data, how we communicate in the digital world will change. But the idea of writing is going to stay. And our intent is to make sure we take that and make it so powerful that it becomes natural writing in the digital age. If Surface's vision is to be the most productive planet on the Earth, then the pen is something that is going to enable that vision along with the Surface device. So we are committed to pen and inking. Yesterday, you might have heard announcements on Spartan and a few other things that Daryl will talk about shortly. We are truly committed, both from a hardware and software perspective, to make our writing experiences great for our customers. Go to the next one. Who are our customers? A lot of times we travel, we meet people, customers, partners, suppliers from around the world, And some people ask, hey, who cares about writing anymore? We just type emails now. But there are a few set of customers who still earn a living, capture thoughts, create new ideas, and create imaginative stuff. And those are people who work in offices. They take notes in meetings. Students take notes. Doctors are a huge category of people who walk around, take notes, write notes about their patients. Artists and illustrators, we have a group of people who are constantly taking the pen, creating new pieces of art, whether it is with software created by third parties or whether it's created by us. There is a whole spectrum of people who are earning a living and making creative stuff, artists and illustrators. And then one of the most important categories we have is students and educators. How many educators there? Everybody are educators here? Okay. And how many of you used the Surface Pen? I forgot to ask that question. That is fantastic. I'd like to hear more towards the end. But these are the set of audiences who are so important to us that we are constantly having a forum of these audiences, and then we go talk to them on a constant basis, get feedback, and find out what is relevant for them. How do we make the writing experiences great? Go to the next one. This is just a framework. It is not fully detailed. So as we talk about the session today, I'll share some of the stuff because of confidentiality, it'll be more at a higher level. But this is just to show you how we think about the framework of solving the problem. There are several things that impact the writing experience. There is latency, palm rejection, like identifying whether it's palm or your finger or your pen or something else that is touching the screen. Eraser, when you erase a digital ink mark, how do you make it feel like an eraser, and how do we solve that problem? Storage, pen touch, ergonomics. So I just listed a few of them just to show you these are some of the things that people care about. A lot of times they are not able to articulate it, but when they use it, we can see that it impacts their writing experience. And then depending on what they do with the pen, whether they are information workers, sometimes it's the same set of people. A person might be an information worker in the office, but an artist at home. So, but based on their usage scenarios, some of these factors are different in terms of amplitude, in terms of impact, it's going to be different for each of those people. So we kind of look at this and figure out what's most impactful, which audience, and how do we create a pen that addresses the concerns of all these people. This is something I want to stop and reflect. Students and teachers, these are the key things that we found from our feedback from students and teachers. People like to take notes, very obvious, signature, whether it's an application form, online application form, or PDFs, navigating through tests, arts, sketches, playing games, doodles during classes, and sometimes annotation. So this is something I want to show you. I think, that work? Okay, sorry. I will show you in the end. I was trying to annotate on the PowerPoint. We can annotate on the PowerPoint.
Windows P, let me try.
Yep, let's try Windows P and duplicate. Nope. Okay, sorry about that failure, but when you use the PowerPoint, when you using the PowerPoint on your machine, you can actually put it in present mode and
So as that's coming back, what Vineet's talking about is the scenario I think of is in a classroom where the teacher gives the material to the students beforehand so they don't have to type everything down or write everything down with the pens, and they're able to annotate a PowerPoint slide or a Word document or whatever they're given in real time. So a couple things with that. It frees them up to listen to what's being taught. I see some heads nodding here. And also that when you do that writing, that piece of writing it down connects it to the memory, so you just remember it better later on too. So that to me is a really powerful classroom scenario with the pen.
Yeah, and then thank you, Daryl. Thank you for continuing the conversation. So as you continue your presentations, you can save those annotations. But then there are contexts of use. There are devices that you operate your pen with. So pen is a complete ecosystem in itself. How do we influence the device while designing the pen? Then you have to define what the pen needs to be. And then there is an external environment that people work in. You sit on a chair and try to use this. People sit on airplane seats and do it. So there is a context around usage. So we look at each of these factors and say, how do we solve the problem? Input detection, how do we find whether it's a finger or a palm or a pen? And there is a lot of algorithmic work that Daryl and the operating system teams that they do to figure out what's the best way to find out whether it is a palm so that it doesn't react to it, whether it is a finger where you're trying to navigate, or a pen you're trying to write or maybe tap something. Backward compatibility. This is where I think a lot of times we say, hey, at what point do we leave behind the past? There is constant innovation happening in the industry. There is our heart says, yeah, we have sold so many products to our customers. If we change the platform, it's going to hurt them. How do we think about it? So this is a constant battle for every company in this industry, because we're constantly looking at new technology. Our goal is to make sure we make it easy for our customers to transition. But there are times when we have to make drastic changes to move to a new technology, because the trade-off in features and benefits that you get out of those are much higher than what you would get by just sticking to what we have. So it's a shift that we have to constantly battle with. When you write with a pen, the other thing that comes to mind is screen dependencies. There are different screen suppliers we have. So when you design a Surface device, there are suppliers like Samsung or LG or Sharp. There are so many people who are supplying screens. And depending on the screen that you pick, your writing experience is going to be different, because there is coating, there's kind of glass that is used. All these things matter. Screen protectors. A lot of people buy screen protectors to protect their screen. And there is absolutely no control that we have on what anybody can go and buy. So how do we think about those challenges, and how do we simulate some of those conditions to say, okay, depending on the different friction levels that we have screen protectors available, or simulating some of those friction levels, we go and try and develop new chemicals, materials, and nibs, working with suppliers and partners. So that's one. And just like I mentioned, screen dependencies, there is impact of dirt and dust and oil when people use it, leave it in their cars for long periods of time, or kids use greasy hands. How do you make sure that the pen can still write? So these are some fun challenges we get to work on a day-to-day basis. This is one story I want to tell you, angle and stability. So when we use the pen on the device, so this is where some of the interaction between the pen and the device plays a big role in how we define our experiences on the device. When we launched Surface Pro 2, we had a 3-stop hinge. I don't know how many of you have seen that. At the end of Surface Pro 3, awesome. Yeah, you should raise it and show it. Surface Pro 2, it's a great machine. It's an absolutely great machine. We run, a lot of our team members run Pro Engineer and really advanced modeling software. Awesome. So, I should talk to you. So when we talk to customers, the feedback was, hey, so we went to do a whole spectrum of customers, the slide that we earlier saw, information workers, artists, students, and so on. And we said, hey, what's your most preferred position? And we were kind of observing them, and they were using the device. And we gave them dummies, and they came back and said, this position, this position, this position. And we couldn't find a statistically significant data on what's the right position to lock in. Is it 3? Is it 4? And then we said as a team, hey, what if we just made it continuous full friction? It is not an easy thing to do. I'm sure you see it in current laptops. You have one. It is a full friction hinge. But the challenge with the Surface device is the center of gravity is on the top, unlike a traditional laptop, because the weight of the base helps you hold it. And this is a light stand. So we had to design something that had a torque curve which gave us about 10 degrees free movement, so that it is easy for anybody to just open it. And then, I wish I could sketch somewhere, but the torque curve went something like this. If the torque went on this axis and the degrees, you had to go 10 degrees flat, and then the curve had to go up, and the curve would go down like that. So it's a really complicated thing to do. It took about 7 engineers, 7 parts, seven months of effort on this across, like, literally the supply chain for this hinge is across China. So it is such a complicated work to make it happen. So the funny thing is, when you start writing on this, at this angle, it is totally fine. But when you actually take it backwards, you want to make sure that the torque is high enough to hold the weight as well as the riding pressure. And the riding pressure changes as you change this angle. So it's a super fun project that we had to go solve. Finally, this is how, of course, many of you have it, but those of you who don't have it, this is a video that I wanted to play. And these are all the angles at which we tested the pen and how it works and how we wanted to make sure it can kind of beautifully withhold the pressure of writing. Let's go. The next one is, so we talked about the device, how there is a close interaction between the device and the pen. And now we talk about what are the different functions. When we design a pen, there is the question, this is a digital pen. Should it make it a traditional pen, just like Pilot, Montblanc, or anything else? Or what else can we add to this? Is there memory we can add? Can we write? When you're using the pen, should the pen be a mouse? Or should we have both of them? And how do you think about the interaction paradigm? So that's a question we constantly try to answer and figure out whether it's a mouse or a pen, and if it's a pen, if it does just writing, or what features can we add. And then one of the things that we ended up adding as a team is the OneNote feature that Daryl will talk about. That's fascinating innovation, how we thought about it. Location, airplane seats. I remember when we were doing the hinge test, one of the things I told the team is, hey, we should be able to sit on an airplane seat in economy class and should be able to operate the hinge and write on it. So I actually called a friend of mine in Boeing. He's a technical fellow. He shipped us 6 seats. And every time we had prototypes made, we sat on that as a team and figured out, okay, does it work? If it fails, we go back to the drawing board and kind of tweak the torque levels. So it was a fun experiment. But this just goes to show how much we are committed to hearing from our customers, understanding their pain, and kind of addressing them. Power consumption. How do we decide whether it's a rechargeable battery versus a Quad A or a AAA battery? So there is a lot of functions. So there is a writing experience. There is a Bluetooth module that Daryl will talk about shortly in the pen. So there are a lot of functions in the pen that draw power. At certain point, we need to figure out when do we start moving to a rechargeable battery. And there is a constant trade-off. There are benefits of rechargeability because a rechargeable battery not only gives us the ability to recharge and not having the customer insert or buy a new battery all the time, but it also gives us the ability to make the pen thinner. For example, if you see some of the Samsung pens, they're really thin, they're rechargeable, they can dock inside the device. But one thing that was true north for us was we are designing a pen for great writing experience, not for great storage, but great writing experience. We wanted to make sure artists and illustrators can hold the pen for 4 or 5 hours in a day and not be kind of tired. So ergonomics was very fundamental to our design idea. So the diameter of our pen is 9.1 millimeters, and the write range, ergonomic range, is between 8.5 to about 10.5. So we had to play between the right range and make sure that the holding comfort is great. The other question is, now that we are not making the pen thinner, how do you store? Of course, we had the clip that you can actually store the pen, or should we be able to dock it? And we decided to go with the clip because it, as I said, if we are trying to create a natural user interface, we are saying, hey, pen is something that somebody carries personally and carries just like a pen. There are other funny things that happen as a part of the exercise. Reliability is one such thing. Now, when we design the tip, how do we design how long the tip should last? It's a very difficult question, and people use it. Some people use it once in a week. Some people never use it, and some people use it every day for hours together. So we have to find the right curve in terms of usage patterns and find out how do we get to, ideal would be close to 6 sigma, but where does the business trade-off happen? Should we ship them separate tips, or how do we design that? That's another challenge that we face, and our tips currently in the market are doing really well. We had some tips which were softer, but we've replaced them with more longer-lasting tips. And that's the question we constantly ask. How do we make sure the writing experience is great and it lasts longer? Because the more the friction, the lesser the life, the more it's going to kind of wear off. So that's the problem we get to solve. Clip strength, the drop, screen impact. How do you make sure people, if they're hitting, they don't break the screen? So these are some of the challenges. And in the end, if you have specific questions, we can answer those. Go to the next one. Yeah, and then we do a lot of innovation in software, and that's where Daryl, my friend, is going to talk to you about it.
So my turn. I'm Daryl Wilson, and to give you an idea of what I do is I'm a software and firmware PM in the Surface group, and I work on both pen and touch. So what that means to me is we want to make pen and touch the experience that will make people put away the MacBook like you had and just use our device. So I do want to ask you, do you have a Surface Pro as well?
I very much have a Surface. My only problem, if you want me to be completely honest,
Yeah.
is I have a big gut, and with the hinge on the back, it doesn't fit on my lap.
Gotcha. So when you use your Mac, do you ever try and touch the screen?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so that's a problem
I
I've...
very much prefer my Surface, to be honest with you. It's
Yeah.
just when there's no cable.
Yeah.
My legs are too short, too.
That's my only complaint. I'd
Sure.
much rather be, I can get out of the handwriting thing some more. But I very much...
We've heard those complaints, and I'll say that much. And so, yeah, great. But so my point with that is, I'm one of my sons has a Mac. I didn't buy it; it came from Grandpa. And oftentimes when we sit down to go to work together on it, I'll touch the screen, and I'm like, oh, there you go, dude. You can't use this. You need a Surface. So I know for me, using touch and pen all the time is just automatic now, and I need that interaction, and it makes me more productive. So what I want to talk about a little bit is our technologies and some of our features. So as we went from Surface Pro 2 and had ideas for Surface Pro 3, we were thinking, what scenarios can we expand upon and make this a super valuable product? And one of them was the click with the pen. And hands up, anyone who's used the click with the pen? Good. Seen it on commercials? All right, so a little bit familiar with it. We've heard that feedback too, so we'll continue on here.
Fidget too much for that clicker.
Yeah.
It's opening constantly.
Yeah, it's a fun to fidget with too. You like fidgeting, okay? So to incorporate this experience, we used our Bluetooth technology in the pen, so it has a active digitizer on one side and Bluetooth on the other side to enable the scenarios. And so what we wanted to build was for someone to have a thought and instantly be able to click that button, either so you're not logged in or when you're logged in, and instantly take that thought down. So you think of a notebook. What do you have to do to take a note in a notebook? You open your notebook, you click your pen, you start writing. So that's the type of experience that we wanted to also get with the Surface Pro 3. As we continue on, we get feedback like you've just mentioned, and we'll continue to improve the experience. So there's good things coming. We can't talk about all the stuff we're going to do, but there's definitely good things coming. So with the collaboration with OneNote and Windows, it was a great cross-company effort. It wasn't very easy to do, but we're very happy with the feature, and we continue to work with our partners in Windows and Office to continue making great experiences. So when you think of pen, it's not just pen, it's touch too. So when you put your hand on the screen, you have to make sure that we know the pen is touching and that you're not using your fingers. So part of that is palm rejection. We work with our partner in Israel, Entrig, and also with Intel, and with OSG, which is our Windows partners, and we continue to improve that experience and figure out when you're touching it with your palm and when you're writing, and to make sure that's a seamless experience. So there's good stuff going on in Threshold for that. Another item that's coming in Threshold is Direct Ink. Did anyone see the Build presentations yesterday announced? So one of the things they had in Build was a new browser called Spartan, which is, I think the official name is Edge. But one of the great features in that is inking. They're using direct ink in Spartan Edge. And what that allows you to do is to have a consistent platform across Windows that you can ink in different applications and share that ink. So in Spartan, you can annotate with pen, and you can convert that to text, and you save that in that web page. So you save it as a favorite, you go back to that web page, and it has your annotations and your notes there, and you can share it off to different applications too. You can send that to a friend. The great thing about the Direct Ink is it's a platform that allows different application developers to use that platform to quickly have inking in their app that's consistent across different apps. So before, people would have to roll their own, they'd have to come up with their own ideas on how to put menus up there, how to get different colors and highlighters, etc. Now that that's built into Windows, and we know that the success of an operating system is how many people develop on it. We saw Apple do fantastic with their phones and their iPads because it was a great application development platform. And this is what Windows continues to drive to and is succeeding in and is enabling these different scenarios. Pressure curves, so also considering how different people use the pen. So artists maybe want a different pressure curve. You might not be aware, but with our Surface Pro 3 pen, it's pressure sensitive. So you touch it lightly, you get a thin line. You press hard, the line thickens. So this enables different people, like artists using Adobe, or if you're taking notes, is to control the way that how hard you press, what happens as your ink comes out. Got a peek around the corner. So third-party applications, I talked about those a little bit on what's to come, but also we work with third-party app developers directly. Some people we initiate planning and roadmaps so that as we roll out features, they're provided a heads up and we develop those together. And some we see an opportunity where an application is trying to do something and we say, hey, we've got this technology and APIs, we think you can do it quicker and better, and we directly contact them and work with them. Office and Windows. So I touched on that a little bit. I'm a little bit biased, but we've got some good stuff coming this year, and I'm really excited about it. Most nights I pull my hair out about it, but I'm really looking forward to it. So, of course, it's part of the things we can't talk about, but there's some good stuff coming. And it really depends on the collaboration with our Windows partners, with our Entrig, who does our touch platform, and Intel. Intel's a big part of it as well. So there's a lot of moving pieces. This year's, we bit off a lot, but it's going to be fantastic when it's all comes public. All right, I'll hand it back to Vineet.
Thank you. Yeah, our teams are very closely tied at the hip. Daryl's team taking care of all the software side, my team taking care of all the hardware side, but we are really not different teams, just one team working together across Microsoft. So that's an exciting thing. From software, we'll just shift to a little bit more physics. Physics at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we will still do it. So when we think about function, we think about we talked about what does the pen should do. The fundamental thing is the pen should write. And when we say, how do we create natural writing experiences? What's a natural user experience? How do you break it down? So when people write, there are three things. I mean, among other things, like lighting and kind of paper and pen and everything, among other things, there are three things that really happen. One, when you touch the pen or pencil to the paper, you get a certain amount of friction. And then you get a tactile feel on your hand. And then there is a sound associated with that friction. These three things constitute fundamentally in terms of like getting the writing experience into your brain. So that's why a lot of times when you write with digital pens, you don't feel that you're writing or you're slipping. So over since time immemorial, that's been ingrained into our DNAs. And that's something we are kind of trying to solve. How do we create that experience in a digital world as opposed to an analog world? So there is a lot of that we do in terms of optimizing the software, optimizing the pressure curves that Daryl talked about. How do we get the right chemicals, chemical ingredients in the tip so that when it rubs against glass, How do you get that feel? So those are some really cool investments that we do. Tip friction, we just talked about briefly, which is when the friction is higher, the life is shorter. And how do you make sure, what's the trade-off? How do you make sure the customer is not pained by not having a tip when he or she really needs it? Parallax is another interesting concept. When you write pen on paper, you really touch the surface. When you write with a digital pen, what happens is there are 3 layers. So there is a glass layer, there is a digitizer layer. If you have a screen protector, there is another one. And then there is the layer where the capacitive layer where the pen functions, right? So there is a digitizer below. So if you look at the stack up, it can vary from few millimeters, few microns to few millimeters, and depending on what solutions you pick. So what happens is when you touch your pen, before you touch the digitizer, you've already touched the glass. So your pen is above your actual touch surface by a millimeter or so. And then when you look at it, the eye gets deceived. Am I touching? Where am I touching? It is very confusing.
It's like looking at a fish through the water in the lake. It's
Exactly.
not where you're looking at it.
That's a good example. So how do you solve that problem? We can make the glass thinner. That makes the life of the device poorer. If you solve the parallax, then whether you should project the dot straight here or you project the dot perpendicular here. How do you solve that? And there is a lot of algorithmic stuff that we do in the N-Trick chip that we ship today to make that absolutely minimal as possible. So that is something that adds to the accuracy as well. Accuracy we talked about. Again, where you touch, is it exactly where you see that it touches? So there is accuracy, because what happens is in a capacitive, we'll talk about that in the platform a little bit, but in a capacitive, what happens is there are transparent line, conductive lines. There is a hash. And then when the pen comes closer to it, the hash actually acts like antenna, and pen is like a radio. So it picks up the closest dot, and it depends on the refinement of those transparent conductive lines or antennas that is in the digitizer, that you can get absolutely precise dots. So there is communication happening between these two, just like radio communication, and then you have to find the precise dot as you're writing. So it's a fascinating thing to solve. So we spend a lot of energy on making sure that when you touch the pen, it actually touches where you intend it to touch. Platform, there is a lot of questions that we get on platform. There are really credible players in the market. There is Wacom, there is Atmel, there is N-Trick, there is Donut. There's so many players in the market, and each of them are great solutions. They are all picked based on there are business decisions, there are technical constraints that each of these companies try to solve. Fundamentally, there are 3 kinds of technologies. One is electromagnetic. In the electromagnetic, what happens is you have the screen display, and then below that you have kind of planar coils. Think of it like a transformer. So one end of the transformer is below in the form of planar coils, and then the other end of the transformer, an additional set of coils, is in the pen. So as the pen approaches, within about 15 millimeters, it can identify electromagnetic signals. And that's how the pen kind of calibrates where it is reaching out and then identifies the dots. That's electromagnetic. And there is passive. It's like fake finger. Some of the pens that you see, it's like a fake finger. Yeah, so basically you use the same touch technology, but kind of fake the material to make it feel like you're actually touching with a finger. And the third one is active capacitive, which is what we use. That is the N-Trick technology. So in Surface Pro 2, we had Wacom, which is the electromagnetic, and then we decided to move to active capacitive, purely because it gives us better latency and better performance in the scenarios that we operate and we care about. Wacom operates with some specific audiences. It's great for them. So it's purely based on what works for us. Each of them are great technologies in themselves. So that's how we picked the active capacitive. Yes, that is correct. The one that she's using doesn't have battery.
I would have to think you were looking toward, because that N-Trick pen's going to give you that ability with the battery in it to do more gesturing that you want to do with pens long term.
Yes. So
it's not going to probably be able to do without battery in it.
Yeah, so battery enables you to open up a new set of scenarios because you have power. And with power and Bluetooth, you can open up a whole new set of scenarios. There is a lot of innovation work that is going to come up in the next generation of pens. The teams are constantly working on it. I'll be killed if I talk about it, so we will stay there.
I think we talked about accelerometers, so that cat's out of the bag.
Well,
Did I?
the potential for accelerometers.
I don't know who talked about it.
Or the potential for sensors around the outside of the pen was talked about the other day.
Yeah, yes. So there is a lot of stuff. Yeah, we can have accelerometers, GPS, and everything. Potential. I'm not saying we are going to do it, but yeah. So those are the things that we think about. So what did we finally build? So this is just a kind of explored view of the pen, just so you know what are the different components that go in. There are about 170 different components that go into the pen. That's amazing. And all into this little size. So just like Daryl mentioned, we had a front pen, which is what does the writing and the erase functions with a button. And then we have the back end, which does the Bluetooth, which does communication with the OS and enables OneNote and other capabilities. That's a
Couple years ago too, when they said I'll be working on the pen, on the firmware part of the Bluetooth, I thought, that's easy, we'll get it done in a month or so. That was not the case. You have to think about it from end to end, from manufacturability, servicing, and customer first use through battery life. So it's even a tiny little thing like a pen, it's pretty complex, and it takes a lot of people thinking about a lot of scenarios to deliver it. So it's complicated.
It's a very complex ecosystem. So where are customers using it? Hopefully my video works.
My name is Daryl. I'm a composer, orchestrator, and arranger. My favourite feature of the Surface Pen is the fact that it feels and looks like a real pen. And as silly as that sounds, it's really important the way it feels in your hand. Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, you name it, they all wrote the same way. And now we're writing with a digital pen on digital paper. There's something beautiful about that continuity.
My name is Melissa DiCapua, and I am a doctorate student. Using a Surface Pen has been a very transformative experience. It's interacting with the computer in a totally different way. I can actually handwrite my notes right directly onto the screen, which helps me remember them better and score higher on my tests. The pen is also great because I can use it in Photoshop and in Illustrator. As opposed to using the mouse and the keyboard, the pen gives me much more control over what I'm doing on the screen.
My name is Sativan Yu. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Washington. I do scientific research, space propulsion, fusion energy. A fusion spacecraft would allow you to go to Mars in a month instead of 9 months. So as a scientist, I can one-click into OneNote and recall all my notes, as well as to be able to write equations very, very quickly. I have it all in one very portable computer, the Surface Pro 3. It saved me enormous amounts of time.
The Surface Pro 3 and the Surface Pen allow me to go outside and compose wherever I like. Total freedom to go anywhere, to write anything. And that's something that's unique.
The Surface Pen is great to have, to be able to highlight and circle, take notes. And it has infinite number of colors and an infinite number of highlighters. So now I just have one thing I have to bring with me to class.
When I'm brainstorming, I need to be able to do flow diagrams and charts and think very quickly, and the pen is the fastest way of doing it.
It really feels like the evolution of the pen. It gives you that ability to think musically, to write naturally.
So that's it, what we had to talk about. We want to save about 15 minutes for Q&A. Any questions on your mind? And then for those of you who are interested, this is an enlarged version of the hinge that we developed. We can have a, this is just a bigger version, about 7 pieces that come together. Friction levels, materials, coatings, everything. And this is a cross-section of the pen just for you to see, just in case you're interested, what goes inside.
So can you take a picture of that?
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. So on behalf of Daryl and me, thank you for this opportunity. Yeah.
So the native inking in the OS level, is that going to be integrated into modern apps? I'm not sure if they're called modern apps anymore.
Can you be a bit more specific on what sort of things you're thinking about in
So
operating system?
I'm a PhD student. I'm developing a modern app currently in Windows 8.1, and I'm looking into the possibility of integrating the more standard way of inking on the application, and I'm interested in learning what the kinds of data I can actually gather from that ink, such as location pressure data, hover data, that kind of thing.
Okay, so I don't know the answer to that question. If you send me an email, I'm on the bottom list there. I'll follow up for you. But specifically, the Direct Ink platform is available for modern apps in Windows 10.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. Since it's recording, we'll just give you the mic.
Yeah. Dong from Korea. I'm a PhD student, and as usual, here's an episode that I was developing a Touch Plus Pen application on Windows tablet, and obviously because of the palm rejection, it doesn't recognize my touch when pen is on hover. Sure. So I should get down to the OS level to hack the signal and then reverse engineer the signal and extract out the signals back to Touch Plus Pen. So it doesn't. My point here is the pen interaction itself is not only about the pen, but also about the OS level. But also the application is involved, such as my favorite feature of the Surface 3, that when you push the button and the OneNote come out, then what I reconcile about this is it requires a cross-departmental coordination of those interplay or tension management. So I want to hear how you guys are doing with in that aspect.
I can talk about it from a little bit from a hardware perspective. Jump in, Daryl, on software. You're right. The pen is an ecosystem in itself. So, for example, let's look at latency. Latency is a function of what happens in the pen, what happens in the digitizer, and how much the application is tuned. For example, OneNote is the most beautifully tuned for latency we have today. So we have to do it at all those levels. And I don't know for the operating system you have used Windows 10 or are you using Windows 8.1? 8. Okay. So hopefully with Windows 10 and the inking investments that we're making, there should be some difference.
Can't talk about it. So you'll hopefully be happier, but I can't speak of specifics.
Yeah, we have to wait for some more time to talk about that. Yeah. But we've heard that feedback. There's a lot of work that's happening in that space. So absolutely.
When Windows 10 is released.
So I'm a PM on the input platform team.
Okay.
So just to clarify, so you. What are you like? Are you asking for both pen and touch together? I couldn't follow up.
So my question was about how the pen team pay for attention between the other departments dealing with OS or application.
Oh, it's a cross-group collaboration question. Yeah. Okay. We, I don't know you, but. That's good. We are a big company, 130,000 people. Independent of that, we are constantly working closely with Office team, with the OneNote team, with the operating system team, with the Bing team, everybody. So every week, I think from a software perspective, there's constant reviews in terms of what hardware investment making, how does it impact the software, how does it impact the applications. So the teams are crossing paths all the time, and we have a regular rhythm of reviews to make sure when the customer gets an experience, it's a kind of connected experience. And a lot of times, like, it is not easy. When you acquire a company like Nokia, you have technologies which are completely new. And certain points in time, we have to make a business decision. For the sake of integrating, should we do it? Or should we make it so that it's a great customer experience? So there is a constant trade-off that happens.
Yeah, and we are kind of the common denominator, so we work with so there are certain things that can be ported over, certain things that cannot really work really well on Surface, but it works well on the Surface Hub. So it's a trade-off. There is, like he said, it's big companies that are constant.
Yeah, but no doubt we are one company. It just takes time to schedule people and meet with each other, but that's a different thing. But we operate like one company. Thank you for jumping in.
Okay, just as a point of clarification, so the inking overlay, is it strictly going to be in the Edge browser, or is that going to be operating system wide?
The platform is available operating system wide for applications that support it. So they have the ability to call those platform APIs. And I think you're probably the expert on that. They can speak to it. But in Spartan, that's a specific app that uses that platform.
So as you mentioned, the direct ink is a new API set. So any application, you could create a universal Windows app and call in those APIs, and you could do it. It's open. Yeah.
Up here. Since one of the most important ergonomic features from users' point of view is being able to write in a more small, precise manner that they think reflects their writing on paper.
Yeah.
What do you think the most important factors are in terms of the hardware and software and whatnot, hardware primarily, to try to support writing smaller in a more precise way? Yeah. And in your own evaluations, how far off is the size of writing comparable content on a tablet versus the paper?
Sure. So definitely, it's a great question. If you write on OneNote today, or let's say if you write an email with handwriting, if you try to write with a pen, the text is usually larger. And it's a combination of what happens in the pen and largely on the software side. So we're constantly working on it. I can't tell you how far from an experience perspective, we are far from where we should be. But how far we are from solving it, I can't tell you that. But we are working on it. As teams, we're working on it to make sure when you write, you can kind of calibrate the size of the font to what you're writing. Because I understand what your question is, which is when you write, you feel like, hey, why am I writing so big? If I'm writing on paper, I write small. Yeah, we're constantly working on it.
I have a couple comments.
You want to add? Sure, go ahead.
Pen friction. That's what I think of when you want to write, how you write on paper, is having the pen friction on the screen being as close as possible to a pen on paper. So for me, that's part of it. The other piece is palm rejection too. If people are afraid that if they put their palm down or rest on it and they hover and they try and write when they hover, their writing is going to be different. So the better we make the palm rejection, as customers get used to understanding that I can put my hand down and write how I would put my hand down on a piece of paper, that'll get it closer to a pen on paper experience.
Yeah.
Another quick question I had was just if you're doing any longitudinal studies looking at the ergonomics of the pen and minimization of repetitive stress in terms of different pen ergonomics or the friction or other issues, I'm also interested in that. So.
Sure. Yeah, we have not, to be honest, we have not done repetitive stress on that, stress studies on how using pen. It's a big company. I don't know if somebody's doing it, but I would love to know. But this is so right now our goal is to make sure the pen can write beautifully, write like natural writing experience so that there is more adoption. With Surface Pro 3, we have seen like huge uptake in pen usage. Once we see that usage, now we'll start. Next step would be we can start measuring how people are using it and what the stress levels are. Yeah. So there is a curve that we need to kind of pass to get to that level.
Unfortunately, my comment's more of an account question than a hardware question. But I'm a director of technology for a K-12 school, and some of our teachers are using Surface Pro 3s. And I thought the clicking the button, going right to OneNote, even if the computer's locked, was a really neat feature. It requires having a Microsoft account, though. So doing that for students, especially students under 13, is a little bit difficult.
Yep.
From our perspective, if there was a way around that, or if it required an Office 365 account instead of a Microsoft account, that'd be really good for us.
Sure. Yeah, we take that feedback.
Can you send me an email?
Can I also respond to that? You can actually change the default to open up the desktop version of OneNote.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
That was actually my second question.
which doesn't require a Microsoft account. So.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Where does it give you opportunity? That control panel?
Yes, and if you download, you have actually a Surface app.
Surface app. It's the.
You can customize the pen and you can customize your ink curve. It's just on the store.
Just one quick note on it. The name's changed to Surface app because we have something else called
Surface Hub here now.
So yeah, go to the store, search on Surface app, and it's exactly there.
So I find the palm rejection problem so annoying. What I would really love to do is to be able to quickly turn touch off entirely and turn it back on again later. And it's amazingly hard to do. I've seen registry hacks for doing it, but I've not seen a sort of like civilized.
So it's my job that you don't want to do that anymore. If I'm still working here in September, October, then I've hopefully succeeded. If not, they'll send me to the next place. But seriously, great feedback. Do you find that you hit the Windows button at all, or do you find just yeah?
The Windows button, any app over here. When I hold the pen, yes, that's fine. But when I'm thinking, I often do this, and then whatever.
Which application are you using?
Yeah.
Right. A 13-year-old Wacom pen still works fine from an Acer.
Very cool.
So one thing over there is, generally when pen comes in touch with surface, the pen takes over. Touch is killed. So when you hold your pen up in your finger, you're above what is called the hover height, and so that.
No, I know why it happens, but the point is that it's. I have to keep my pen down here.
Like Vineet says, I can't divulge much, but we know we are aware of it. We are working on it, but hopefully later.
Yeah.
Thank you for the feedback.
But for any of this feedback, I really would like some. I think Vineet as well. Send an email to both of us. I can't promise that we'll specifically address what's going on, but this is a great forum to hear everybody's feedback of what challenges you face, and I'd also like to hear what you like too. That'd be great.
I was just going to comment on that too, because you're looking, why am I using a Surface Pro 2? And that's exactly the reason. I need my pen to write when I want to write, and I don't want it to have to sleep. I don't want to have to worry about the battery dying. I don't want to have to worry about me clicking when I don't mean to click. And I take all my notes in OneNote. I've been doing this for, I don't know how many years now, 10? I don't know, a long time. I don't know when OneNote came out. It's been a long time. And when I switched to the Surface Pro 3, the pen wasn't as reliable as my Wacom pen is, and I wound up switching back. I got frustrated with it, and I went through 3 pens, and I went back to my reliable Wacom, because if you look at my pen, I'm on a Surface. This isn't a Surface pen. It's a Samsung pen that I was able to change my nib out because I didn't like the nibs that came with the pens. They were too hard for me, and I liked softer nibs, so I wanted a pen I could change my nib in, too.
Okay.
So.
Sure. My 2 colleagues who have Surface Pro 3s both have problems with their pens. And for instance, my wife has 2 pens, and she gets in a situation where neither of them work.
Okay.
And it's really weird. It's the batteries are fine, everything's fine.
That's his butt on the line for that.
Yes. Yes.
Just to be clear.
That is me. So yeah, if I'm working here in September,
both of us.
If not, I'll send you my resume.
Okay. I had one that was kind of a follow-up on the nib. As far as the nibs go, you spoke about a spectrum of users, right? Some are casual and some just may use it periodically, and in that case, it'll last forever.
Yep.
And then there's that other side of the spectrum with artists and illustrators where it may wear down really quickly. And
sure.
So how did you find that compromise and of, I guess kind of finding some kind of middle ground?
Sure.
And then do you see a future where there might be interchangeable tips and
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, the future is where we will have options for tips, or we will think about getting that spectrum even better than what we have today. There is a lot of work that's going on in terms of finding the right material. I can talk more about it, but we are committed to getting that right. Right now, the friction is slightly lower because we want to have the tip last longer. As you can see, earlier we launched with a softer tip, which was great in terms of writing experience, but people gave us feedback that, hey, it's wearing out faster. We'd like to see that different. And based on the kind of volume of feedback, we went and fixed that. last August. But we are committed to getting that right.
Okay, let's thank the speakers.
Thanks.